to everyone to Still and Moving Center's conversation circle called Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, which we take up every Saturday afternoon. And we take up one of the themes in the Still and Moving Center Almanac, from which Carol Ann just read the back cover. And that idea of carving the atmosphere in which we live and affecting the quality of the day seems very pertinent to this idea of becoming women and men of meditation. And I think something that maybe we're all wondering is, what does that exactly mean to become a person of meditation? And especially if we decide that that sounds like a good thing, how do we do it? And we have someone from a tradition that I am just newly getting acquainted with. It is a branch, or perhaps a sect, of the Hindu tradition, started in the 1930s, that has a Raja Yoga meditation practice. And I've listed in the chat the Raja Yoga meditation page on the website of our speaker for today. This is Judi Rich, and she is the coordinator of the Brahma Kumari Calgary Center in Canada. And so she has been born and raised in Calgary. In her late 20s, began to seek answers to those life questions that drive so many of us forward. And she found the Brahma Kumaris as being very helpful to her in integrating spirituality into her daily life, which she does in daily life as a fitness instructor. At Still and Moving Center, we have a fitness instructor teaching us about meditation. Don't you love that? I do. So with no further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Judi. So nice to have you here.
Thank you, Renee. That was lovely, lovely introduction. And I have to say, I was just sort of reflecting on how incredible life is that I find myself even here, and how we find ourselves in these various different gatherings. And it's just a wonder, the billions of souls on the planet. And here we are together. And how was I so fortunate to find myself here with you? So big thank you for welcoming me into this conversation. And yes, I think for me, definitely an interest in spirituality. And as I learned coming to the Brahma Kumaris, meditation is a very important tool in spirituality. And the whole point of spirituality is really that self-transformation. Or what a beautiful quote that was read at the beginning of the session: to be an instrument to create so much beauty in the atmosphere in the world, just through sort of that self-transformation. So meditation to me is a very important tool in making that possible and emerging that capacity. And then this fascinating topic, women and men in meditation. I was chuckling. I thought, I have no idea how this has happened, that I'm here speaking or reflecting really on this topic with you. So the Brahma Kumaris are the largest spiritual organization in the world, run or led, if you will, by women. And very often that can be seen as a very gender or feminist statement, which is the furthest from what it's meant to be. The very first spiritual head of the organization, who came to be known as Brahma Baba, and he's sort of behind me, but the lights are a little bit funny, was of course in a male body, was a man. And yet the name of the organization is Brahma Kumaris, which is a term for young women, and he was consistently putting women in front, which continues to this day. And so what was that all about? So I really found I was loving this topic because of what I have experienced around it in my life. And maybe I'll just start by sharing a little bit of story, because a huge part of my life has been around movement and continues to be around movement. Whereas spirituality, and I had a beautiful discussion with Renee about this, tends to be connected to stillness. And so a huge focus of my life has been this integration of stillness and movement, which was so central to the study of Raj Yoga. So I remember being a teenager, young teenager, way back in the Stone Age, running track and field, 100-meter sprint. And if you've ever seen a track and field, a sprint race, what you might have seen, which we were trained to do, was all the runners lined up at the starting block, and they're kind of jumping around and shaking to keep those muscles warm. So you sort of see them kind of doing this jumping and shaking. And we were trained to do that because you're about to explode and you really want your muscles ready. Very explosive movement. So if you panned down the starting blocks through the lanes, you would see this until you came to Judi. And what you see then is there was no jumping around. There was some instinct inside to become extremely still and introverted. Some might compare it to, like a coil ready to spring, but becoming very, and no one trained, they trained us the opposite actually, but there's some instinct inside, some deep pull to become very still. And you'd hear those famous words, runners take your mark, and still becoming more and more still. Get ready. And then of course that gun, which is so shocking to everyone, would go off and you literally just exploded. So from very young, there was always this feeling of loving that inner stillness, that silence, a very gentle, delicate state inside, but integrating that with a lot of explosive or a lot of big movement. And I was raised in the ballet tradition. So again, you've got this incredible, it's quite deceptive when people watch, this incredible recruitment of power. It takes a lot of strength and power to move your body in a controlled way, as you see a dancer doing, coming from so much training of the core of that silence. So it's always been a theme through my life of this integration of silence, subtlety, stillness, very delicate, very quiet, with explosive and noise and expression. And I find it completely normal. I'm very often asked, when I say fitness instructor, and they say, "Oh, you must be a yoga instructor." I'm not even trained in hatha yoga. I have no idea. I said, no, I'm actually not. We're doing boot camp. We're yelling at people. There's craziness going on, but still there's such a subtlety and silence inside. So I found this extremely important to me. And then I made sense of it when I came to the study of Raj Yoga and what it offers. What Raj Yoga looks at its core, is this idea that we are spiritual beings or souls, and that we are operating through this physical instrument. Now, this is not perhaps a new idea to any of you, but very often, for some who hear it or reflect, it just kind of stays an idea rather than becoming a way of life, actually doing it. And so Raj Yoga, through the study, we're really guided into practically learning to live this way as spiritual beings operating through the body. And it sounds simple, I know, and it is. But when you have a deep habit of thinking you are the body, the most simple thing can be quite intense. And so as a spiritual being, we actually don't have any gender, right? Where the body might be a gender, but I, the spiritual being, I don't have a gender. What I do have is an incredible spectrum of qualities, some of which we tend to think of as more masculine, and some of which we tend to think of as more feminine. And so I began to have the chance to see Raj Yoga at work in these beautiful spiritual leaders of the Brahma Kumaris World Spiritual Organization. And I always found it fascinating because they do this incredible, beautiful blend of so much authority, so much leadership, so much decisiveness, discipline, determination, courage, but also so subtle, so silent, so nonviolent, so nurturing, so humble. And this blend that we sort of describe as almost they're like mothers and fathers. They have this beautiful blend of being men and women. So it is women and men in meditation, that we are both in meditation, and we need both in meditation or a journey of self-transformation. I am going to need the full spectrum of qualities in any path of self-transformation. I have to have self-efficacy, that self-respect, that discipline, that determination, that clarity. What we tend to sometimes identify perhaps more on the masculine side, but I also need incredible understanding, patience, subtlety, all of the, and that humility, all of the qualities we might attribute more to a mom, the feminine side. I need both of those in managing myself on a journey of self-transformation. And whenever we see students struggling a little bit, it's usually because they are not women and men in meditation, that they've fallen into an imbalance. They're either being way too hard on, like way too disciplined and self-corrective, or they're being kind of very loving, but kind of stuck. They're keeping themselves stuck. And so really to have that blend is so very critical. To be able to have both of those is so critical. And I really love whenever I am running into some issues myself and managing myself through change, I can always look more at what qualities are needed at this time. Where is that imbalance? And this was a deep habit in movement, that when we found we were getting off balance in movement, we're so trained, okay, what do I need to recruit or even let go of in order to achieve that physical balance? Dancers become very natural at looking at themselves and sorting that out. Where have I come out of balance? And the actual meaning of balance is fullness, or having both aspects equaling. This is balance. It's not one or the other, but both. In fact, in Hindi, the term for and sounds like the English word or. It's A-U-R. So whenever I go to the sentence, it'd be like pyari or nyari. It sounds like this or that. Actually saying this and that, detached and loving. So it's always about, I need that full spectrum in order to move myself to progress to a meditative or transformative practice. That's what I'm always checking within the self. And even if we look at the symbols we have for men and women, you're probably aware of them, right? So the man, it's that circle, which represents soul, and then that arrow. So that's the symbol we usually have for male or men. So this idea of going into action, so the soul going into action, practical. And then for women, it's again the circle, the soul, but with that cross, which is grounded or centered or yogi. So ideally what we want is both. I want to be that soul, that circle, both expressing the self in action to the body, but also able to introvert and be very grounded. The practice of meditation that we use is open eye meditation. So all of you right now have mastered the first half of it. You have your eyes open. Congratulations. And the second half is, what is the quality of my inner world? What is that inner dialogue as I move through action? So I actually want both happening simultaneously. I want to be connected, my senses operating in the physical world, the world of action, but I also want to be connected to very timeless or eternal experiences of the self, which we call spiritual, non-physical. I want that beautiful marriage of the physical or the active and the non-physical, that spiritual, that introverted. So I think it's always an interesting invitation for each of us, even as we look at how we talk to ourselves, that inner dialogue. Is there the balance in how I speak to myself? Because that's one definition of meditation, certainly. How do I talk to myself? So to look at that with a little bit of neutrality, not with judgment or criticism, but just to understand myself, look at how I talk to myself. And do I tend to go to one extreme or the other extreme? Or do I have a beautiful balance? Am I a mom and dad to myself? Do I have that balance? Because I find those are the most successful. I'll just end by sharing that the quote that Renee was so kind to send out about detached and loving and the helicopter view and all of that was from one of the senior BK brothers, Brother Charlie, who oversees activities in Australia. And I was actually very touched by what Carol Ann was reading from the back of the almanac, because he, first off, is extremely motherly. But one of the ideas that he speaks to for himself is that to make the mind into a beautiful mind. And one of the ways he envisions that is if the mind, with every thought and associated feeling, is sending out puffs of color out into the world. Not physical puffs of color, but like love, in the sense, this beautiful puff of color, if you could visualize it. And what, creating art in the world with these qualities. So what am I sending out into the world through the mind, these puffs of feelings or qualities? But this Brother Charlie is a beautiful example of a soul who has that balance. He is a woman and man in meditation, if you will, both qualities fully developed in how he speaks to himself internally, but also how he interacts with others. So I'm going to end there and maybe give you a moment or two to reflect inwardly on, do I have that balance of qualities inside, just in the way I treat myself internally, how I speak to myself? Do I tend to go way over to one extreme, kind of just maybe keep myself stuck, or way over to the other extreme, overcritical maybe, over judging, and I just become disheartened? Or do I find that middle ground, which is so supportive and yet still moving me forward, not keeping me stuck? So maybe take a moment to reflect, see where it takes you, and then certainly welcoming a conversation on your feeling about women and men in meditation. So what do you think? Regardless of the body you're actually sitting in, are you a woman or a man in meditation internally? Are you both? What do you think for yourself?
I think for me, perhaps, Judi, it does depend on the circumstance. If I am finding myself wavering, unwilling to make a difficult decision, I may need to, apply a little force. Okay, Renee, let's get it in gear. Get off the dime. And then other times, maybe if I feel as if I've maybe spoken more harshly than I wish I might have, I'll give myself that inner kind of more motherly counsel, do unto others. Is that the way you would like to have been spoken to? So I think it kind of goes back and forth.
That's really beautiful. I love that you shared that, Renee. I agree that, what is the need of the moment? And hopefully I have within me what is needed for that moment. And it could be any of the spectrum of qualities. Yeah, absolutely true.
I think I have like a monkey mind. And so my mind bounces from wall to wall. So when I do meditation, I remember that there was only one second where I felt that I was in complete meditation. Otherwise, your mind has a tendency to wander and not really but it was such a small time, but it felt really good. And I thought, wow, if I can learn to expand that and make it for a longer period, then, I truly could benefit from it more.
Beautiful. Yeah, I know how much I appreciate it, even if it was, as you say, a second. At least then I knew I had the capacity that it was there. And then kind of this nurturing stage needs to come in. Let's do this drop by drop. We are not, it's been a long time. I was very aware in myself that I've had a habit of thinking a certain way for so long, and it's not going to change overnight. So that understanding piece had to come in, but you're absolutely right. That second, just to know, can be so sustaining to the self, to file that away in my memory bank that I know I can do this. So then I become the mother and very patient. Diana.
For me, I really liked how you were talking about masculine and feminine as qualities. And I'm aware that in our culture, the qualities you put for masculine or feminine are in all our culture. Other cultures, they have different ways of being. And it's like really allowing ourselves. I work with Zazen meditation, open eyes. And it's like what I talk about is sitting meditation and living meditation, that I sit to find that stillness and quiet. And then I take that out into the world. And for me, our mind is a monkey mind. And I've meditated a long time. And what I'm really learning is instead of thinking I'm not supposed to think, it's being that gentle, like a little child going off the path, and we gently bring them back to the breath, because mine is a breath meditation. And so it's like why I like open eyes is because we live in the world with open eyes. And I tend to leave my body when it's closed. So it's really good for me to have open mind. And I really, Zazen is talking about the middle way, but there's a way of allowing each moment and having faith in this divine moment or in this divine timing, that this is what I need to do now. And without so much trying to think, oh, and I think it's important. I really like how you said, am I more harsh on myself or am I too kind or whatever? It's like finding that way of understanding and just being aware in that moment. How am I and what am I doing? And like Renee said, am I speaking in a way to myself or to others in a way that feels loving? Instead of putting out anger and hurt in the world, how do I live my meditation of peace and faith and trust in a way that I'm living with integrity and authenticity? And that I don't think it's interesting because especially with our culture right now, with everything's going on, I believe we're spiritual beings in a body. And it's like, we have such a spectrum that we all are male and female and those qualities. And it's allowing ourselves to even own the strong feminine. Sometimes I talk about owning the queen energy, that I need to own that I can be a strong feminine. It's like trying to find that balance with how do I bring together my heart and my mind and my soul and spirit and live from that place And I don't know most of the time. I'm really practicing. My daily practice is living in this only moment, which isn't so easy. And I keep bringing myself back like a wandering child to this only moment. And then I ask for divine guidance. It's like, what am I supposed to say and do in this moment? But the only way I can do that is if I really, for me, if I do my seated meditation or prayer or whatever works in terms of touching into that spiritual base and then coming from there in the rest of my life. And I think that what you say about putting out in the world, there is so much hurt and anger and hate that if I live from that fear, I'm putting that out in the world. So I really want to work with unconditional love and even understanding those that I totally disagree with and sending them love and light, because sending them judgment and hatred does not work in terms of what I want to put out in the world. So I really look at how do I have my seated practice, but then how do I take my seated practice into my living every moment? And I really enjoyed your talk. Thank you.
Wow, Diana, you just covered a whole beautiful territory. I don't even, every time you're saying something, oh yeah, I wish I could bring one of, we call them daddies, elder sisters, and we only have one left really in the organization. They were all young girls when they came, and you started by saying, how we might, the culture we might have been raised in, and I mean, if you can appreciate, these were young women in an Indian culture in the 1930s. They certainly were not thought of as becoming potential future leaders or even embarking on a spiritual path. What they envisioned for them in their culture was to become married. Their husband would become their guru, and they would have. So you would not believe the opposition that they had to face, simply because they had that deep love for humanity, and they wanted to contribute beauty to a world that seemed increasingly going into sorrow. But there were so many pieces, and one thing that you reinforced a couple of times, which I completely experienced for myself too, is in those seated times to have that experience, a very deep experience, if you will, of the true self or authentic self, to have that imprint so deeply on me, and then to see if, so carefully I can fold that as I come into action and interaction. And it's interesting because this is a principle in fitness. So people come into the gym, which is a very artificial environment, quite frankly, and we have to do these exercises that really don't have much to do often with day-to-day life. I mean, for example, the plank. It's not like we're going to crawl around like salamanders or something. Like, we don't move through the world in plank position. But the hope is that we'll do the plank, we'll get the alignment, start to develop the core strength. And what we often would find is people that have these beautiful planks, they hold them for whenever. And the moment they sit up, it's as if nothing's happened. They go back to that old alignment. So it seemed the most important piece was what you spoke of. I have beautiful experiences, but I don't live in isolation. My heart is not built for isolation. It's built for action, interaction, and contribution. So yes, in that artificial moment of seated meditation, I have the chance to really experience myself in a spiritual way, authentic way. And then the part I love, which you spoke to beautifully, that integration, carrying that into my day-to-day life. That's what I find fascinating. Yeah, and that takes a lot of power. So thank you. There's a whole lot of other wonderful things you shared, but that really touched me. Thank you.
So when you are working with your movers at the gym or wherever it is that you're doing your fitness classes, how do you help them to integrate so that they are taking that plank from the horizontal up into their vertical sit or stand, and then also that same kind of alignment that they've gained on the physical plane? What do you do to help them gain that on the more inner plane?
Beautiful. Yeah. And one of the things I've been experimenting with a lot increasingly is what we actually are doing in the gym. There's the term functional fitness, that we're trying to do things, becoming very creative not conventional exercises at all, very creative, to get things to fire that in a way that's a little bit closer to what they're going to be doing in their day-to-day life. So that's one area that I really like exploring, is just the creativity of the types of exercises that we're doing. And to be honest with you, many of the souls that are coming, I hate to say, because they're injured. So they're so motivated to acquire a skill. So because if they don't step a certain way or move a certain way, they will just experience pain. So it's lovely to work with souls that are motivated to transfer this over into their day-to-day life. And whenever we're doing exercises, we really speak of what might this look like as you're walking down the street? How does this carry over? So we're always trying to suggest that there has to be some integration or crossover. And lately, it's funny what you were sharing, because lately one of my favorite, because I do a lot of deep stabilizer work, alignment work. You're not going to see me in the gym teaching Olympic lifting. There's people who are far more skilled at doing that than me. And one of my favorite cues, and the clients seem okay with it, they never look at me like, what kind of cue is that? Is if they're trying to balance or do something crazy on unstable equipment, I say, okay, I need you to become very quiet inside, very still, as if we're doing a meditation, but they're doing physical exercising. And it's fascinating to watch. They begin to look like an open-eyed meditator exercising, because you see them becoming all the qualities that the meditator would need, so focused, so concentrated. But now they're very invested in doing that because they want to master this alignment of skill. And being in movement, I have been so touched at how, for me, it's really shaped my spiritual journey. So I appreciate your question, because for it to be practical is so important to me. Diana used the word authentic or genuine even. That it's so easy, and you could even say perhaps I'm doing it now, but it's so easy to talk about things. But I became very aware early in my own study that there's a massive gap, or there can be a massive gap, like the Grand Canyon, between saying something and actually living it or walking it or even experiencing it. So I could say, yeah, no, I'm a soul, and not feel it at all. Or I can become very conscious and intentional and quiet and almost fearless and say, yes, I want to feel what it means to say I am a soul. That piece we are constantly driving home with our fellow students, is we don't just want to share points, but we almost sometimes say when we are discussing, we say, if it's possible, one of the rules of conversation, if it's possible, can you feel while you're talking about something, can you feel it while you're talking about it? Because it's so easy to go into the intellectual. Can you feel it while you're talking about it? And I know you mentioned, Renee, which I agree 2000%, that to speak something helps to imprint it. But it gets super powerful if while I'm speaking it, I'm actually feeling it or experiencing it. I'm not just talking from my head. I'm really talking from the heart. So feeling, that's going to go very deeply into the self and more likely become practical. So it's a work in progress, I guess, is what I'm suggesting, that question you've asked, but it's so important to me that, just again, we want to be, you suggested that, human beings, fully developed human beings, that's so important, that love for humanity that everyone here has. And what I know it's going to require, I become in order to be an instrument to express that kind of love. So I need to be walking the talk. That's so, so important to me. So, and I think to everyone who's here, so yeah, something definitely reflect. I'm always reflecting on the question you just asked. Is this becoming practical? Does anyone else want to share? I see all these beautiful names. If anyone else wants to share.
Well, what was said so beautifully about Zen is very much my practice too. I do Zen basically in the Japanese tradition. And as you were talking, one of the things that came to mind, Dogen Zenji, the founder of Soto Zen, has a book called Instructions to the Cook. And the cook is probably the second most important leader in a Zen temple, right next to the practicing primary teacher. And he said, to practice Zen, you need three minds. The first mind, you need a happy mind. You need to be grateful for this human birth, because any other form of birth, hungry ghost or animal, simply can't reach enlightenment. Well, even the gods, as they say, one of the six paths, can't reach enlightenment, only human beings. So you have to have a grateful mind, and then you have to have a magnanimous mind, a mind that is like a mountain or a full moon or the ocean. But the third mind he talked about was, it's translated usually as elder's mind, but it's a nurturing mind. And in several sutras, it says, the Buddha says, take care of your mind as a mother would care for her child, her only child. And recently I was reading a translation of this, and it's called Mother's Mind. Elder's mind works in Hawaii because kupuna, but the idea of a nurturing mind. And so that I think complemented what I think of as Zen. Also, in the Japanese tradition, it's very male-oriented, and most of the key figures are male of the ancestors. But we have three bodhisattvas: Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion, Kuan Yin, and we have Samantabhadra, the bodhisattva of action, and Manjushri, the bodhisattva of wisdom. And they're usually depicted as male, but there's a wonderful Japanese a woman artist from San Francisco, now living in Hawaii, who has depicted all of them as female. So you have Manjushri as a woman with the sword that cuts through delusion, and you have Avalokiteshvara as a woman riding a crane, projecting compassion, listening to the cries of suffering in the world. And Samantabhadra is usually depicted as riding an elephant, but she's actually riding a bicycle with the elephant on the handlebars. So that's Samantabhadra. And so we have these three pictures in our Zendo, and everybody's asking, what are these women pictures going on? But she's written a whole book called Goddesses. And to me, that kind of, brings back the idea that really in Buddhism, or Zen, you're practicing with your mind, and you've got all kind of energy, and you could call it male, female. Monkey mind is probably more accurate, but you still have to nurture it. You still have to take care of it and be grateful.
Oh, wow. I loved what you shared. And that mothering mind is just beautiful. One of my favorite, ways of looking at the self often is this compassionate high. But it was very beautiful what you shared, Bob. Thank you. And it reminds me a little bit, in Indian culture, which is a very often patriarchal culture, especially when these young women were growing up in the 1930s. And there's always this, and this is quite common, I think, in many cultures, but they would say that, you'd have these wealthy businessmen, etc. When they get into trouble, what do? They go to the temple to Lakshmi, or the temple to Jagadamba, or so these temples, they're all women, they're all goddesses, the Shaktis, they're all going for help, for power to these temples of goddesses. It's a very odd situation in that culture. What's happening practically in day-to-day life, and then where they actually feel power seated. And there's a wonderful story about the birth of the goddesses, the Shaktis. Oh, there's a request there. Bob, can you give us the artist of the book, what you were just speaking about? There's a request for that.
Well, I'm sorry, I thought I gave her name. Mayumi Oda, O-D-A, Mayumi Oda. And she actually teaches creative art making, usually for women. So I can't get in.
It's interesting about the the myths around how the goddesses were born, the Shaktis in Indian culture. And of course, there was this battle going on between this demon and the gods. And the gods were throwing everything they've got at it, the armament, the power, everything they're throwing, and they're just not, it just didn't seem to be feeding the power of this demon. And finally, just out of exasperation, I think, or just the admission that this is not working, they gave birth to the goddess Durga, which gave birth to the other goddesses, and they were able to conquer the demons. And this is a theme that shows up over and over again. I remember The Hobbit, and I was very confused in this because there's many storylines going on, but there's a wonderful scene in The Hobbit where, again, the evil force has been told, no man will ever be able to conquer you. And they're on the battlefield, and there's this little soldier sitting there, and I'm going to conquer you. And he says, no, you can't, because I've been given the blessing that no man will ever conquer me. And then they pull off their helmet, and it's a woman. And of course, she's able to conquer. And again, it's not about gender. It's about these surprising qualities that actually make change possible. These game changers that we all have within ourselves that are going to unlock change. And that's what I've loved about Raj Yoga. Constantly surprising. We often will be trying harder and harder and harder at the same old thing. And we need to maybe draw on a different quality inside to unlock newness within the self. So it's always a discovery for me of what do I need to invoke? And it's so beautiful. Every human soul has a whole spectrum of qualities. Maybe some I've been using more, but they're all available to me the moment I consider myself to be a soul.
I'm going to take this huge leap of faith that I'm not putting Mary terribly on the spot. Mary Bird is one of the people who comes to Gems from the wisdom traditions most often. And she is both from the Catholic faith and from the Hawaiian tradition. If you're fortunate enough to get a hug from Mary Bird, it's like the most divine hug you've ever received in the whole world. It's almost not just motherly, grandmotherly, it's a goddess-like hug. And so I see her feminine qualities. I feel her feminine qualities. She's so supportive of everyone in her daughter's hula halal or hula school. Like, Mary's everybody's mom. And I'm just wondering, Mary, whether you also feel that you have hidden masculine qualities that really carry you through. I know that you have been through difficult times and recent difficult times. And I think that there must be something of that inner warrior that is carrying you through. And I just wondered, would I be terribly putting you at...
Oh, you're horrible. You're horrible. Bless you. I love you.
There she is going, being mothering again.
Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you so much, Judi. This is very interesting. I was just wondering, what is a monkey mind? I have never heard that term before.
So many might use it in different ways, but I remember being in India and you get to see monkeys and it gets a little scary sometimes, but they tend to they are prone to a lot of attachment and a lot of desire. So they tend to jump around a lot, going after whatever they see as an attainment. And if it happens to be your food, look out, because they're going to jump on you. But this idea of really jumping out around, and the reason it's important to say that they are motivated by what they feel is fulfillment of some desire, that this jumping around is not, does not have an order to it or a motivation or reason behind it. And that's very important to understand in the self, that, some people say, I have a monkey mind, I can't focus. And I always say, well, if it was something that you were really interested in, I bet you could focus. I mean, I can focus on chocolate like nobody can, right? So I might appear to be all over the place, but if you just tell me to think about chocolate, hey, I'm all there. So the monkey, when you see them in India, and you see them appearing to jump all over the place, they've actually got a particular objective in mind, which is I want that attainment, I want that food or that banana or that attachment fulfilled or whatever. So it appears that we're jumping around in a chaotic or disorderly way, but actually there is a reason behind it. So a very robust spiritual practice will be able to drill down to what is the seed of what I feel is an attainment. And it will allow us to really, so for most people, I just want peace. I just want love. So if we watch our mind honestly, again, with that very caring understanding, we'll notice that where it's jumping around to, let's say self-respect is very important to me, or respect or being valued. That's the places my mind will be jumping around. It will look like it's chaotic and distorted and I can't focus, but actually it's just moving around to those various places where I perceive I can attain some sense of value. But usually it's meant a mind that jumps around in a seemingly chaotic way and can't focus.
Wow, that's interesting. And to answer or to address the question or the thought, the theme of male and female, I go back to Renee's comment about circumstances, because when I think about a mother, if anybody touches her kids, she becomes a lioness or a tigress. So that is not a very feminine reaction. That's a very male quality to protect your loved ones. So I have had that experience. Of course, now that my children are adults and they have children and I'm a grandmother and a great grandmother, I look back and I think, okay, I did that. Now I can be calm. I can just, I can't do anything that's really going to save people right at that instant, because we have to step back. They're not our children anymore. They're themselves. However, it's also a very enlightening. I mean, I was thinking the older I get, the less critical I am of myself. I'm not, I'm not looking back and say, oh, if you had done this, and that's never going to happen. We have what we've done and we are reaping the fruit of that. I'm so blessed with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and wonderful friends. Renee is at the top of that list. And by extension, all of you, I see people from week to week and we get to know each other. We share a little bit and I just am so blessed. Thank you. Thank you.
So beautiful. I just met Mary and I can already feel a lot of what Renee just said. Simply, it's really lovely that when we can sort of let down those walls and just reveal ourselves, we're quite beautiful beings, and each one is so one of a kind. I think each is their own beautiful blend of male and female. And as you were speaking, Mary, I was remembering a lot Dari Prakashmani, which means jewel of light. And she was the second administrative head of the Brahma Kumaris. And she used to say a lot. She was the organization really flourished under her leadership. She was so loving and engaging and enthusiastic and a remarkable soul. But I remember there would be one or two moments when I would just catch her on a walk, or with her by herself. And she would look at, I can't even say she was looking at me. I felt she was very absorbed internally. And part of the practice is this link to God. So I felt she was very much engaged in that. She would look in my direction, and I would feel such a depth of stillness and silence, and realize that was the secret of that engaging, warm personality. So she used to say, the world above all needs love. Souls just need love, but it takes a lot of power to be a loving soul. It takes a lot of power, especially to be an unconditionally loving soul, regardless of whether or not I am related to that person, or whether or not they even like me, or whether or not they're insulting me, to continue such a deep need in every being for that love, that value. And it takes a lot of power to be a loving soul. But I feel that in you, Mary, I really do, that you must have a remarkable, that balance, a remarkable power to give that experience to others with so much love. Oh, pleasure to meet you.
I wonder whether other people may want to share either, like Sharon did, questions with difficulty in regard to meditation, or experiences that you have that might be helpful to somebody else in attaining meditation of some sort, closed eyes, opened eyes, in stillness, in motion, whichever way. But I just wonder if people have either comments that are questioning or helpful comments that would, benefit the rest of us, perhaps.
I think I like to share. When I do yoga, I like yoga a lot. And I remember, like, if they're doing constructions outside and people say, oh, it really bothers me, I don't like the noise. And I thought, what noise? Because I think when I'm doing yoga, I'm focusing what's inside of me or what I'm feeling throughout my body, that it makes me focus on that rather than what's around me or surrounding. And then the thing about when you were talking about whether we feel like we're male, female, I think that in doing meditation and yoga, I'm unisex, because I don't look at myself as being female or male. So I don't understand, that thought when you're doing it, or even when you're out in the world and you're interacting with people, I feel like it's the same thing. It doesn't matter whether I'm male or female, I'm a female, and who I'm talking with, they happen to be a person. And maybe it might seem too forward to people, like you're female and you start conversing with a male in some chatter, and then they look at you, it's kind of strange. I just look at myself as a person and not the sex. So I wasn't sure what you meant when you said about if you identify as male or female.
Yeah, no, it was really, thank you, Sharon. It was really just looking more at the qualities, to use those terms more as they apply to qualities rather than to gender, which is often how they're used, is to apply to gender, but more looking at the qualities that I have within myself. What we might think more as masculine, or we might think more as feminine, or archetypes of those, but more qualitative than what we say quantitative. And it's very interesting you're sharing, because a key part of meditation or Raj Yoga is to be what we call a master of the senses. So whether it's the eyes or the ears, you talked about hearing some noise and how I experience that, a master of the senses. So this is also part of moving on a meditation journey, is that I'm actually not so full. My thinking and experiencing isn't so affected by what's coming through the senses, that I remain a master in terms of what experience I'm having. So moving from the realm of quantity or the physical, what we see physically, to the realm of quality, what we feel the qualities is what we're looking at. Carolyn.
But I just want to say that the most important perspective from my learning and my experience is to remember that each of us is an immortal soul. And I think that transcends, but without necessarily negativity, transcends all the various dichotomies, gender or ethnic or whatever. So that's, seems to me that's critical to, and that's more difficult than you might think. Me, an immortal soul, but that is a way to view every human being. And that gives us balance and stability, but individuality. So I just wanted to insert that as maybe that's the third point in this discussion.
Yeah, that's really, thank you, Carolyn. That's really the essence, actually, of Raj Yoga, to experience myself, to be that immortal soul. And we even sometimes use the example or image of a seed and a plant. So the seed is what we call soul consciousness, that experience. And yes, it is a challenge because we have the habit of thinking of ourselves as a body, but that experience that I am a soul, that's the seed. And out of that, always these two leaves first emerge. So that full balance of qualities is emerging from a single seed. In fact, it's not possible without that seed. And we'll always be coming into dichotomy. But with the seed, I can fully express the full spectrum of qualities that we're using the term men and women for, but suggesting it's really just a full spectrum of qualities that, you know, it could be enthusiasm and accuracy, or detached and loving, whatever we want to use, that seed is definitely what makes it possible, that I am a soul and I have access to all those qualities, and to see others as that way is also very, very critical. Again, moving beyond what the physical senses suggest and opening what we call the third eye to see others as a spiritual being. Yeah, very important. Thank you.
I think when you talked about the immortal soul, every individual has that. I'm reminded of what Carl Jung, the psychologist Carl Jung, talked about, that every individual, whether male or female, had an anima or animus. So you may think of yourself as male, but your feminine side is the other quality that's sort of shadowing you, and you need to bring that forward. And if you're more feminine, then the anima is the shadow and comes out. So there's that kind of balancing for an individual to realize that you have two sides of yourselves, and it's like the yin and yang. It's constantly moving in its balance.
And then, as Carolyn was sharing, how will it be possible to bring that balance? I have to go into the experience of being a soul. One of the symbols we use in Raj Yoga, which some of you may have seen, is the symbol of Vishnu, a four-armed image that's holding these ornaments. And that represents full balance development. It's actually the combined form of Lakshmi and Narayan, who are considered to be rulers of a golden age world. So it's their combined form, neither really male or female, but Vishnu, this perfectly balanced being, so that I don't even come to people with the expectation they will complete me, but I am complete myself. So now I come to a very healthy relationship with others, not needing them to complete me, but being able to have a very healthy interaction. So absolutely, this idea of balance is a natural result of I am a spiritual being also. Chris, welcome. Share, please.
You can hear me okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I was just wondering, as far as the you're talking about qualities, both male and female. That's really interesting to me because I mean, I guess in my inner self, I never really gave a thought to which qualities I pulled towards more of, but I was thinking about it more, and I wanted to ask, let's say qualities of like self-love, caring, understanding, showing compassion, patience, definitely being less critical. Would you say those qualities lean towards the more feminine side?
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting thing. I've come to a point myself where I'm finding it more and more challenging to separate, because everything you just listed, caring, compassionate, understanding, as was mentioned just a moment ago, they require incredible power to be able to do. And so one of the things that we have in the organization, the Raj Yoga Brahma Kumaris, is that it's an organization that put mothers in front, and then, or the Shaktis in front, and then the Pandavas or the brothers become the backbone, because we figured out we can't really separate them. So if you are compassionate, which I'm sure you are, compassionate and caring and understanding, you probably also have the so-called magnet that you probably are quite powerful, because I don't know how you could be those things really consistently and unconditionally without the power. So it's neat as an organization. You've got this motherly, what we might call soft power, this form of leadership. But wow, it is power. It is power. I remember one scene I saw where Dadi Prakashmani, we were in the middle of class and she stopped because a sannyasi, a sage, was coming to visit. And on their spiritual path, how can I say that? They should not be in the presence of women. They definitely should not touch women, and they definitely should not accept gifts from women. They have a very specific idea about women, but they have deep respect for the Brahma Kumaris. They've earned such an incredible position of respect in the spiritual community in India. So they came to visit. So you're watching this really interesting dance on stage where you have Dadiji meeting this sannyasi. He's very respectful, and he has his assistant, and Dadiji has her right hand with her. And we always give gifts in the Brahma Kumaris. We always give gifts. And so the assistant, hands Daddy this gift to give to the sannyasi, but he cannot take a gift from a woman as part of their custom. Normally that's a sign of deep disrespect to not accept the gift, but he nods to his assistant. The assistant takes the gift and walks around and gives it back to Daddy's assistant. It's this crazy dance you're watching. And the whole time Daddy is just nodding and smiling and so loving. And you're just saying, what a powerful soul. There's just so much respect oozing from her, even though this might be a very disrespectful gesture. And I kept saying, it's so loving, so generous-hearted, so pure, and yet I can feel the power. So I find it difficult to separate them now, but we might say, yes, caring is very motherly, and the power behind it is also very necessary. Great question, Chris. I think these are all things for us to reflect on, actually.
Yeah, I actually wanted to clarify. Those are qualities that I find that I'm just beginning to grow in. And so, yeah, no, I definitely need to work on all those things, especially being less critical.
Perhaps somebody would like to offer a vote of thanks to Judi for this incredibly beautiful and insightful, in-depth presentation and responses to questions and comments. And Diana.
I would. Judi, you exemplify compassion and love in the way that you speak and what you share, and you really are living your practice daily. And it is about it's not male and female, because actually in the spiritual practice, it's not male and female. Those are words our ego put on it. And I really love how you brought it into action and how important it is. And I thought it's a really important lesson right now with everything going on in the world, is how do we live our spiritual practice in our daily life and in movement, and really combine all qualities, not just the male, female, but to really live from a place of centeredness and love. So thank you, Judi. It was beautiful.
I will take that as a blessing that I need to live up to. So thank you.